Hey folks, welcome to this video which is going to show you how to set up your Mac computer to develop audio software in 2021 using JUCE 6 and Xcode. Okay, the first things that we need to go over are what we are going to do in this video. We are going to download Xcode. We are going to install it. We are going to grab the JUCE framework. We are going to build Projucer. I'm already going to lose count, so I'm going to stop doing this. We're going to clone the JUCE repository. We're going to build Projucer. We're going to make a project. We are going to make a repository for that project. We're going to make some changes to that repository, and we're going to push them online. And then we're going to give a brief overview of the code that goes on in a GUI project using the JUCE framework. And then we're going to talk about Git GUIs for a little bit. And that's going to basically get you up to speed with the workflow that goes along with developing software using the JUCE framework on Mac OS X. Okay, I am currently using a copy of OS X Catalina inside an install of Parallels because my computer's already set up, and the purpose of this video is to show you how to set up your computer from scratch. The assumption is that you, the viewer, have never done any sort of coding before, and you're really interested in it, so you need to know how to get up to speed as easily as possible. So that's what this video shows. How to do that. It assumes that you have a brand new computer or a brand new install of whatever operating system on Mac you are using. Consider this, you're starting from a blank slate. You've done nothing but just turn on your computer for the very first time and you're ready to go to install software. So from that perspective, let's go ahead and download Xcode. Okay, so go ahead and open up the App Store. You're gonna need to sign in if you haven't, so be sure to do that. Once you are signed in, go ahead and search for Xcode. Xcode is the default IDE for OS X. Okay, once you find that, just go ahead and start downloading it. Now, it's a pretty big file. Let's take a look at this. It is 11.6 gigabytes, so depending on your internet speed, it might take a while. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get this going, and I will I'll chime in once this is done downloading. Okay. Xcode has finished downloading, so now what we must do is open it. Now when we run this, what it's going to do is install some command line components, which is going to be very helpful for when we're setting up Git repositories and doing a few other things that are just go along with the process of developing software. So let's just open this for the first time and see what happens. Okay, we need to make sure we agree to this stuff. Then it's going to install these components I was talking about. Okay, there it goes. Xcode has finished installing those components and is ready to be used. Okay, so we can close Xcode, and then we can also close the App Store. So let's get rid of that and get rid of that. Next, we need to clone the JUCE framework, and we need to do this using terminal. So I'm going to open a terminal window first. Terminal. Now, terminal is the command prompt. Windows has, the command shell and whatnot. So what we want to do is first figure out where it is, and we can do that by typing open and period, and it's going to open a Finder window wherever the terminal is currently displaying its contents. In our case, it has opened up to my user folder. I can show that by adding this path button, and now I can show which folder is actually open. I can do that same thing by typing ls. That, and I can see that I've got my desktop, downloads, documents, library, all the stuff, all the folders that we're seeing here. Let's go get the JUCE framework. Open up your browser. All right, now we're going to search for JUCE, J-U-C-E, framework. JUCE is hosted on GitHub, so we're going to go there to grab it. And now we want to click this to clone the repository. We're not going to download a zip file. Do not download a zip file. We want to clone the repository. And I will explain in a little bit why we are going to do that. Let me go back to Finder. Okay, so I'm going to type git clone and then that URL that was just copied. Now this is going to download the JUCE repository from GitHub onto this computer. It's going to make a copy of that repository, which includes all of the branch history, all of the commits and the changes and all that stuff. Okay, here it goes. It's coming in now. Okay, it has finished cloning, so we can take a look real quick. Click on this button, and now we can have a different view. Okay, so here we can see all of the, this is basically what's partially downloaded. We're not seeing everything because I am not showing hidden files. I will show that in a little bit. But for the most part, we've got this extras, which contains several, existing projects. Here are some example projects, and then here is where most of the Juice code actually lives. They live inside these modules. Okay, so what we need to do now is open Projucer and build that, because Projucer is the tool that we use to create all of our projects using the Juice framework. So navigate to your Juice folder, click on the extras folder, locate the Projucer folder. Now go to the builds directory inside that. You're going to open Mac OS X, open that folder, and then you'll see a Projucer.xcode project. Okay, just double click on that to open it in Xcode. Okay, Xcode has opened up. All we need to do now is go to the product menu and build. Now we just wait for it to finish building. So one of the things we can look at while it's building is click on this button right here, show the report navigator, click on that, then click on the current active thing, which is this thing shown here. And now we can see all of the files that are currently being compiled, especially if we turn on all messages, we can see all of the source code that is compiling. All right, so we just need to wait for it to finish. And then once it's done, we'll be able to use this application. So this is the cool thing about Juice being open source, is that we can actually see how they built every little piece of this. All right, build succeeded. Cool. All right, we can close Xcode for right now. Now what we want to do is go into this build folder, which is next to the Projucer Xcode project. There's a debug folder inside that. And inside there is Projucer. Okay, we're going to want to have this handy in our doc. So go ahead and open that for right now. And then down here, you're going to right click. You're going to go to options and you're going to keep it in the doc. Okay. This is the Projucer project wizard. It allows us to create a bunch of different types of projects. We can do a GUI project, an audio application, console app. We can do a plugin. We could do a library. We can do an OpenGL thing, an animated thing. Before we do any of that, what we need to do is first configure Projucer to run we need to configure it to run in GPL mode. And then we need to configure our global paths in case we happened to clone the Juice repository into a folder other than our users folder. Okay, so let's do that first. Let's go to the file menu in Projucer, go to sign in, and now click enable GPL mode. Okay, now Projucer is going to run in open source mode, which means it's not going to ask us for a license. It's not going to show an about screen saying this was made with Juice or anything like that. Okay, so next we need to configure our global paths. Now, the way this works is Projucer wants to know where your Juice folder is, and it wants to know where your modules folder is. Okay, so if you clone this to your users folder, as we showed earlier, these paths right here are fine. You don't need to change them. If you cloned the Juice repository to somewhere else, you need to go in here, click on this button, and you need to navigate to your Juice folder. Okay, do the same thing for the modules. The modules are inside the Juice folder. Okay, that's very important. If you don't have the modules and the path in the right place, when you go to export your project, it's not going to build and it's not going to run. Okay, now that we've done that, let's create a new GUI project. Okay, make sure you're under the application side. You're going to click on GUI. And now right here, you can just type your project name. I'm going to call this Hello World. Okay, now click create project, and it's going to ask me where I want to save this. I want to keep all of my projects inside my users folder in a folder called programming. So I'm going to add that now, programming. Okay, and then just click open. It's going to create that project. Here we go. And now we can take a look around, or we can just open it in Xcode. Let's just take a quick look. I just want to show you where these files actually live on the computer. So I'm going to right click, reveal in Finder. And these files live inside, let me go back to that programming folder. Programming folder, Hello World. They live inside this source folder right here. Here's the builds directory. Here's the Juice library code. I'll talk about those in a little bit. Here's the Juicer file, which is basically what this thing is when it's open. And then here is all of our source code. These are these 3 files that we see right here. Okay, click Save and Open in IDE. All right, now we just need to run it. Do the same thing where we click right here and we can see what it's doing. All messages, show all. You can see it's compiling all of these things. Build succeeded. Now it's going to run our Hello World project. All right. Now Xcode is going to be able to debug our application if we grant it access via this prompt. Okay. So click enter in your credentials and click continue. This is going to allow us to add breakpoints and pause our code and all this kind of other stuff, which is very, very helpful when we're trying to figure out why stuff isn't working. All right, we're just waiting for it to run. And there it is. There is our Hello World, very simple GUI application. So every desktop application that has an interface starts this way. Okay, even Xcode started as just a very bare bones project like this. And a bunch of components and stuff were added to it. Okay, we can go ahead and quit this. And we can quit Xcode as well. All right, then we can quit Projucer as well. Okay. Now I want to show you something called hidden files. And if we go back to our JUCE repository right here, you can see it's not showing them right now. If I press Command-Shift-, now we can see the actual Git repository. And there's a couple other things. There's a GitLab thing. There's a Git ignore file. There's a GitHub thing. And then here's the actual Git repository, which contains all of the code changes. We are going to create a Git repository for our project that we just created. Now, it's very important that we have these. It's very important that we have show hidden files turned on. So let's do that now. Click in here and just do Command-Shift-. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, that turned it off. Okay, it's on right now. We need to navigate to this folder so we can create our Git repository. So type cd in terminal and just drag in your Hello World folder. All right, now we are inside that. If I type ls, I can see the builds folder, the Hello World, the JUCE folder, and the source directory. Okay, what we need to do now to create our Git repository is to type git init, like that. That's going to create a Git repository, which we can see right here via this Git folder. Okay. Now, it's time to learn about Git ignore files and why they are so important. So the whole idea behind Git is that changes that you make to your files are stored. Like there's initial base copy of the files that is stored, and then any changes you make to those files is what gets stored next. So that way, the Git engine can take the base copy of the files and say, all right, what's the first change that happens? Okay, let me apply that change to these files. What's the next change that happened? Let me apply that to these files. And it continues on until you get this massive Git history. So that's what all of these commits are that we see here, right? Here's a bunch of little bit of changes that happened to whatever these files are. Here's a bunch of changes that were made to this file. And then these changes. All the changes kind of compound on themselves and build up. And after a while, you end up with the code that we have got in the JUCE repository and the code that we have in our project, okay? So what we want to do is make sure that we do not include certain files, because those files are regenerated every time we rebuild our project or every time we resave in Projucer. Those files are everything in the builds directory. For instance, every time we click the save button in Projucer, it recreates this Xcode project. Unless we set a setting, I'm not going to talk about where that is. I can talk about that in a later video. And then every time we compile it, it's going to recreate this thing. So obviously we don't want to include that inside. We don't want to include this Hello World binary inside of our repository. Just like we don't want to include this hello world.xcode project because it gets recreated every time we resave in Projucer. Same thing for all of these files in the JUCE library code. Every time we resave our project, these are automatically regenerated. Okay, and it says here, it says right here, it says all files will be mercilessly deleted and completely rewritten whenever the Projucer saves your project. Okay, so we need to add a git ignore file to this, so that way when we add our source files to our project, those folders are excluded. So let's do that now. I'm going to type touch.gitignore. let's see what Git thinks is available to be tracked in the repository. So I'm going to type git status. So as you can see, there's our source directory, the JUCE library code directory, the juicer file, the builds folder, and then the git ignore file, and then also this ds store file, which is something MacOS puts inside every directory whenever you change the view type. So if I click one of these buttons, or if I right click and do sort by and choose one of these things, whatever settings I put for how this folder is being displayed, that gets stored in this ds store file. So obviously we don't want any of that stuff inside our repository, because anybody who clones our repository is not going to care about that stuff. Okay, so what we need to do is edit this git ignore file and exclude the ds store, the builds directory, and the JUCE library code directory. All right, so let's do that now. Open this up with text edit. And now you're going to type */ builds. On the next line, */ JUCE library code. It's very important that this is spelled exactly the way it is spelled here in the folder. So capital B for builds, capital J, capital L, and capital C for JUCE library code. And then for the ds store file, that's going to be */ .ds _ capital STORE. All right, now if we save that, go back to terminal, and if we type git status, it will not show ds store, it will not show builds, and it will not show JUCE library code as untracked files. Okay, check it out. Now the only thing that is currently untracked is the source, the juicer file, and the git ignore file. So that's awesome. So that's very, very good. Okay, we need to add our files. So to do that, we type git add and then a period. That's going to add all of these untracked files. All right. Now if we type git status, we can see that these files have been added to the repository, but they are not, they haven't been turned into a commit yet. Okay, so we've got our main component.h, main component.cpp, basically everything in the source directory. Then we have our juicer file and we have our git ignore file. Okay, so let's create our commit message for these things. Okay, actually, before we do that, we need to configure the name and the email address that the commit is going to be made under. So to do that, open up Xcode and now go to the Xcode preferences. And then you're going to go to source control, git, and this is where we can set the author name and the author email. This refers to the stuff that we see right here where it says this person made the commit, or this person made the commit, or this person made the commit. Okay, we're going to do that for our own repository. Okay, so I'm going to enter in my name, MattCat Music, and my email address. Okay. And then now I can close this. That's going to update the git config on a global level. There's another way to do it via shell, via the terminal, but it's annoying. It's, we just installed Xcode. Let's just do it there. It's nice and convenient. It's very easy to see what's going on. Okay. We can now do git commit -m initial commit. This is going to create a commit message just like we got going on here. And it's going to commit these 5 files. All right, now if we do git status, on the master branch, nothing to commit, no changes, the working tree is clean. Now, I don't know about you, but I think using git via the terminal is annoying. So this is the last time I'm going to do it. I'm going to switch to using a Git GUI. Now, a Git GUI is a graphical application which lets us interact with the our Git repository without having to do it via the shell. So to do that, I'm going to go here. I'm going to go to fork.dev, and this is the current Git GUI that I like to use. Okay, so I'm going to go down here. I'm going to grab it for Mac. It's got the free evaluation. Yes, allow. All right, this is going to download very quickly. Now I just need to install it. All right, just drag that to applications. There it goes, and now we can open her up. All right, let's open up Fork. Okay, so the same thing that I set in Xcode is now showing up here as the username and the email address. So, if you want to change it here, it's also going to change what appears in Xcode, as well as what would appear if you were to edit your global Git config But don't worry about that. Just leave this all the same. What you're going to want to do is change this default source directory to be wherever you're going to put your projects. I'm putting my projects inside this programming folder. So that's where I'm going to choose for that. And I just click finish. Here is my Hello World project shown as a recent repository. So I'm going to double click on that and it's going to show up here. Here's my initial commit. Here are the files that were committed. I can take a look at the actual source code changes. Everything in green is what was added, which is cool. You get to see all the lines. When we make changes later, you'll get to see what lines that are removed look like, and if we add any files, what that looks like as well. Well, you can already see what it looks like here. They have a green plus sign next to them. Okay. So I want to take a quick look and show you the JUCE repository so you can see. Let's see, to do that, I need to close this tab. I'm going to go to File, Open, and then I'm going to navigate to where I put the JUCE repository. All right, here's the JUCE repository, and you can see all the changes that they're making. We are currently on the master branch, and in a little bit, I'm going to talk about how there is other branches that they have in JUCE. But for right now, just know that we are on the master branch, and that's the same branch that we are on here. Okay, I'm going to talk about branching in a little bit. All right, what I want to do now is to make a change in our project, and then we're going to commit that change using fork. So let's go to our Juicer file. Go ahead and open up Projucer. Our Hello World project is the most recent thing open, so it should pop up right away. Click Save and Open. All right. Now I want to make one change. So I'm going to navigate to my main component.cpp, and I want to change the font size. Okay, I want to make this font bigger. Right now it's font size of 16 points. I want to do let's double that. Let's do 32 points like that. Okay. Notice there's this little green line right here, or this little blue line. Let's run this and take a look. Okay, so our text right here for Hello World is much bigger. Okay, I'm happy with that change. If I was working on a team, I would, say, hey, do you like the way this looks? Do you think this is cool? And then my supervisor would say, yeah, this is cool. Go ahead and get that ready to be merged into the overall project. So I'm going to make a commit showing this change. Okay, we're going to do this in fork. All right, so we go to fork. Let me increase the size of this window real quick. Okay. Go to where it says local changes, and now I can see what the old value was and what the new value is. So before it was 16, now it's 32. Okay. Now if I want, I can. I have to stage this commit. It's the same thing where we did git add over here. Yeah, git add right here. We're doing the same thing. Okay, we're gonna stage these files to be committed. The changes have not been recorded in the Git repository yet. That's not until we actually commit them. But before we can commit changes, we have to say, hey, this file needs to be committed. And we do that by staging that file. Okay. So now that I've made my, I've staged that file, I'm going to put a commit subject, which is going to be changed, no quotes, changed font size. Okay. This is the exact same thing where over here we wrote initial commit inside quotations. Okay. That's what doing this does. Okay. Instead of having to type git commit -m and then put a message in quotes, I can just stage the file here, and then I can just type a message here like that. Okay. Commit one file. All right. Now that's committed, and I can go see here that here is my commit, and here is the change that was made for it. Now let's make a repository on GitHub that allows us to store our changes on another computer, in this case, a server that exists on GitHub. Switch to your browser. If you don't have a GitHub account, go ahead and make one. I'm going to sign in real quick. Okay, I'm currently signed in. So I'm going to go to my repository page. Go right here, signed in. Okay, I'm going to go to my repositories. And now I'm going to click new. Or actually, I could just click this button right here, new repository. Either way. Okay, let me do that. New repository. Click that plus sign, click that drop down arrow. New repository. All right, I'm going to give this the same name that my project is currently named on my computer. Hello World. All right. I'm going to make it private just because I can. I don't care if anybody else sees this. I'm not going to add a README. I'm not going to add a git ignore, and I'm not going to choose a license because it's private and it's just a, it's a throwaway project. We're just getting our feet wet with how software development works using Xcode and JUCE, etc., etc. So I can just leave all that blank. All right, create repository. Okay, what this has done is created a blank .git folder in my account for this hello world thing. Now, what I need to do on my end is add Git as a remote. Now, it's actually a lot easier to add a remote via command line than it is via fork. I mean, they're both simple, but it's like the command is right here, so I'm just going to do that. Okay, I'm currently still in Git, so what I can do is just copy this line right here, git remote add origin, and then the URL to the path. Okay, I'm going to copy that. I'm going to paste it here, and just push enter. All right, now I have a remote added. Click on here. Here's the remote. Okay, the other way I could have done is to right-click on remotes, add new remote, and then it would ask me for the URL and the name of it, that sort of thing. Okay, but I'm not trying to, that typing in that command, copying that command from GitHub right into the terminal shell, which is already in the folder, is so much more simpler. Okay, now that that has been added as a remote, we can push our changes onto GitHub. So if we right-click master, push master to origin, that's going to push all of our changes on the master branch to GitHub. So let's do that real quick. Push master to origin. Push. All right, we have to supply our credentials. Okay, if we don't do this here, this is going to give me an error. Cancel. If we don't do this here, we can go to open a new tab, go to accounts, and then now we can add our accounts this way. All right, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to just log in. All right, now it's going to give me this prompt, which is nice and easy to use. Reload. Okay, now we need to authorize fork so that way it can talk to our JUCE repository for our behalf. All right, cool, there we go. And the benefit of this is that when we look in our account, we can actually see all of our repositories. For example, we're waiting for it to load. Now that I'm logged in, all right, I can see all of the repositories. These are all of my students. But then I also have all of my, if I look for MatCat music, I can filter them. MatCat music, I can see all of the other, I can see my individual projects, and it's very easy to download them and to clone. Okay. Enough of that. Let's go back to our project. Okay, I have created a remote for this, and I'm going to push my changes to that remote. Push, like that. Okay, it's pushing them. All right, changes pushed. If we go to our, if you go to your GitHub page now and you refresh, your code will be here. Here it is, changed font size. Let's go see what that commit is all about. That's right here. We can see that it was 16 before. This line was changed to now be 32 on this side. Okay? All right. Let's talk about making branches now, because branching is one of the most important things you can learn how to do in fork. It basically lets you separate your changes from other people's changes. For example, imagine that we have, actually, you know what a great place to look to demonstrate this is the master branch in JUCE. Okay, the master branch in JUCE is, the most stable version of all of this code, of the JUCE framework. Now, we have a bunch of commits which have happened since then, and they clearly, they're fixes to things, right? Like this fixed some file permissions, fixed a test failure, fixed some comparison warnings using Clang 10, fixed bypass and program parameter indices when JUCE force use legally param IDs is 1. Okay, a lot of fixes are happening on the development branch, and sometimes these fixes are not fully verified and fully vetted by all of the developers that are using the JUCE framework. So a lot of people prefer to keep their work happening on the older, more stable branches. For example, we've got JUCE version 6.0.8, and you can already see that the master branch is 2 commits ahead of that. So this is like an actual release version of JUCE that they have said, all right, this is cool, this is stable. If you go download the zip file from JUCE, this is the version you're going to get, 6.0.8. If you want to get a more current version, check out the master branch Or if you want to get the most up to date, which may contain weird stuff that may actually not work with your project, you can check out the development branch. Now let's take that same line of thinking to our project and say, we're going to implement, if we go back to our Xcode, we are going to implement a new sentence here. We're going to change the text color and we're going to change the font size. Okay. So let's say like this is a feature request from our user base and they want to see new graphics. Okay. So we'll go to fork. We're going to right click. We're going to create a new branch. It's going to ask us for a name. So we're just going to say updated graphics. Let me spell that correct. Graphics. Create and check out. Okay. Now any changes that we make, that we commit, are going to show up on this branch. So they're not going to show up on the master branch, and that's very important. Okay. So let's do those changes right now. I'm going to change this font size. I'm going to make it even bigger. I'm going to go 48. Okay. I want to use red text. Let me make sure I spell that correct. And I want this to say, hello, new PFM student. All right. So I made 3 changes, and then we can actually see those changes here. Like this, we can see what the old one is and what the new one is. Let's hide that change. Let's run this. Okay, these are the updated graphics that we have been asked to create. Cool. All right. We like those changes. Let's make a commit of them. All right, let's go ahead and commit those changes. Updated the graphics. Stage them. Write our message. Commit those changes. Now these changes do not live on the remote. They do not live on GitHub yet. We have to push those changes first. Okay. So let's go ahead and do that. Push those changes. Now what this is going to allow is anybody else who is checking out our project can go ahead and clone them and check out this branch. And then they'll be able to say, okay, yeah, this is cool. Let's go back to the master branch and see if the difference is if it's good or if it's garbage and we don't want to include it. Okay. So that's going to show up if we switch to, if we go over here, let's go back to our code. And here we can see there are 2 branches. Okay. We've got this branch and this branch. Right, and we can actually see that here. You can see there's an up-to-date branch. There's an active branch. It's 1 commit ahead of the master branch. And we can go look at our commits and see that way. If we go to our commits, we can see here's the initial commit that we made. Here's where we changed that font size on the master branch. And then if we go to our updated graphics branch, we can see that the graphics commit is right here. How is this useful? Okay, it's useful because I have these changes where I updated the graphics and I might not like them. So I'm not ready to send them out to my user base. I'm not ready for all of my customers or all of the people who use my app to see those changes yet. Okay, if we go back to the JUCE thing, maybe we're not ready to have a bunch of people use this fixed version of the ADSR because we're still trying to tweak it a little bit. We think we've solved the bug, but we're not sure. Okay, so this feature of branching lets us do that. Okay, we can say, you know what, I've got this branch, it's experimental, I'm not sure if I'm ready for all of my users to use it, so I'm going to just put all these code changes right there. Everybody else, though, they can just go back to the master branch. If we go back to our code, you can see that it's 32, the text is white, and it says hello world. And if we rebuild it, that's what we will see on our interface. Okay? So this is cool. We don't need to make a duplicate of our project folder to have a copy of the changes. We can just check out the branch that has those changes on it and then just build it and see those updated changes. And this is really handy when you're adding in new features to your plugin project, like adding new bypass buttons, or if you're adding new slider graphics, or if you add a new feature like a new reverb type to your FX processor, that sort of thing. Okay, so that's where branches are really, really helpful. Now, I'm not going to talk about how branches get merged and all that stuff. I'm going to cover that later in a separate video as part of the day 1 through 7 experience. I'm going to talk about now how Git GUI projects, how JUCE GUI projects, are put together and the files that go into them. So I'm going to make this big. Okay, and I'm going to turn on the assistant editor. Okay, so JUCE GUI projects start out with 3 source files. The first one is main.cpp, and this is going to basically spawns the generic window that we see, and then inside of that, it puts a single component, which is basically the main window. This is the stuff that JUCE creates for us. Okay, that's what's going on this line right here. Okay, it's we have this hello world application, and then inside of that, it stores a main window, and then the main window itself hosts this main window object. Okay, now the main component is right here, and this is the thing that we actually see in our component. It's the primary child component. That's what's mainly going on here. Okay, a lot of JUCE stuff is built with child components. Components are the main building block. They receive all the mouse events. They're what we draw our stuff in. They're what other child components such as buttons and sliders and other visual elements get added to. Okay, their main features are a paint function, which we draw all of our code in, and then a resized function, which is basically if it has child components, that's where they all get positioned. This is going to become more apparent as we get further and further into learning to write with JUCE, but that's basically how JUCE GUI projects are put together. You've got your main component, and then inside of that you put other child components, and then you customize how those child components look via the paint function, and then you lay them out via the resized function. You specify how they are positioned. So I'm going to do a quick toggle button just so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay. Let me spell that right. Okay, here's our toggle button. I'm going to add it as a child component. All right, toggle buttons. Nothing shows up on screen unless you give it some bounds. So I'm going to do that next. Toggle button dot set bounds. All right, I'm just gonna, let's see. I'm just gonna give it like an X and Y of 10, and then a width of, let's see, 30 and a height of 30. So it's a square. Okay. Now the important thing to remember with JUCE and most computer graphics is the upper left-hand corner is 0, 0, and the bottom right is get width and get height. Okay. So if I run this, you'll see that this toggle button shows up in the upper left-hand corner. All right, there it is. There's our toggle button. If we click on it, it does stuff. Okay, so that demonstrated how we add child components, we make them visible, and then we change their bounds in the resized area. Now, I'm not customizing the visuals of this, but this toggle button does have its own paint function, which controls how it ends up looking. Okay. So let's make a commit, which shows that we added a toggle button. And you notice that the changes were made to both the header file, main-component.h, and main-component.cpp. So we can say added a toggle button, like that. Okay, let me stage this, stage this, stage this. Okay, so I'm going to add my toggle button. That is now committed, and now you can see that the commit does not exist on GitHub. It does not exist on this remote. It only exists on our computer, so we need to push those changes like that. All right, now if we go back to our code here and reload the page, we can see there's our toggle button. Now, I want to show you what's cool about it existing on GitHub. Okay, I'm going to go over to Xcode. I'm going to close Xcode. I'm going to close, let's see, I'm going to go to Finder. Get rid of this. I'm going to go to my Hello World project. Where did that go? That's over here, programming Hello World. I'm going to delete this. Okay. All right. Now I am going to clone it. So let me close it here. Let me make a new, let's see, let's refresh this. Rescan repositories, don't keep current structure. Okay, I have nothing there, but if I go to my accounts, I go to my repositories, wait for this to load, and I'm going to look for Hello World. And the other way to do this is the way we showed before. Go to the repository itself and click the code button and then copy the URL and just clone it. But we'll do it in fork. Okay, let me go right here, Cat Music. Okay, we're looking for Hello World. And we are going to clone this by clicking this little arrow right here. Okay, that's going to get copied to that Hello World folder. We want to use our GitHub account. Clone. Sure enough, there it is. Okay, and you'll notice that there's no builds folder. There's no Juice library code folder. There's just our source folder, the juicer file, and the gitignore file, which is perfect. So now let's open this up. And now we can save and build. And now it's going to create the builds folder and the Juice library code folder. And here's our code. We can go ahead and run it. Let's see what ends up being built. Is it the master branch? Is it the branch with the toggle button? Let's find out. Okay, it's the version without the toggle button. So let's go ahead and close that. We can close that too. Let's look at our repository here. Close this guy. So here we can see the check mark is next to master, which means we are on the master branch. If we want to see our toggle button, we got to just double click to check it out. Now let's go back to Projucer, save and reopen. All right, and let's run our code. See our toggle button and our updated text. All right, there it goes. Very cool. All right, let's do a quick review of what we covered in this video. The first thing we did was we downloaded Xcode from the App Store. The next thing we did was installed Xcode and ran those developer tools, installed those components from the very first time we ran it. Then we cloned the Juice framework using terminal. That was over here. That's under the users, MacCap. This folder right here, we cloned this via terminal. Then we opened and built Projucer in the extras folder. Then we ran it in GPL mode so that way our projects don't show up with an about screen and with a made with Juice icon. The only requirement for using things in GPL mode is that we must make our code open source. So what I actually need to do is go to my project. Because it's open source, I need to go to my settings. And I actually need to make my repository public by changing the visibility. Make public. There we go. Please type the name of the repository. Very simple. All right. So now I am currently conforming with GPL when I do that. Okay, after we did that, we made our Hello World project. We ran it several times. We made some changes to our code. We turned on the ability to show hidden files, which is where our .git directory came from, the gitignore file came from. Same thing for here. Then we created a Git repository. We created a gitignore file to hide the builds folder and the Juice library code folder and the DS store file. Okay. Then we configured Xcode so that way whenever we make our commits, it shows our username and our email because those need to be included whenever you make a commit. Where did that go? That's here. That's this stuff right here. We can see who made the commit, who the author was, and what their contact information is. Let's see. Then we downloaded Fork and we switched to using Fork. We made a change to the project. We made our commit in Fork. That's what this changed font size was. Then we made our repository on GitHub. Then we made, we pushed our changes to GitHub. That's what this origin master is showing us. Then we made a branch and we did some work. We updated the graphics and we pushed those changes to GitHub. Then we demonstrated the whole idea behind branches and how to switch between branches so we can change the feature set in our plugin and put the more recent untested features. We can make sure our customers don't have those basically. Okay. Then we did an overview of how JUCE GUI applications are put together by adding a toggle button and showing it as a component. Okay, so that wraps up this starting from scratch video on macOS, showing how to set yourself up to write software using the JUCE framework and Xcode from scratch, assuming you have never built anything before in your life. All right. So that wraps up this video. Thanks for checking it out. The next video is going to cover how to set up your first plugin and how to make some noise with it and how to set up the JUCE audio plugin host so that way you can work on your plugins without actually needing to have a DAW such as Pro Tools, Logic Pro, Ableton, Cubase, Bitwig, FL Studio, any of those guys. Okay, you can do it all without having any of those. Obviously, you're going to want to have those so you can test your plugin. when it's time to put it in front of actual customers, because customers use those things. They don't use audio plugin host to make their music. But that's beside the point. You can get really, really far working on your plugins using the JUCE audio plugin host. So I'm going to cover that in the next video. All right. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next video.